So yes, I'm going to dive right in with some quick introductions. Lynne and I are partners in the Coaching Cafe, and together have put True Leadership together. And Cindy is a very special client of ours who's been exposed well, being a client of ours in individual coaching as well as team coaching. And also as part of the development program. So we thought it would be really great if she could join us, and you could hear how it really happens in practice and not from the people who designed it and do it. So yeah, Lynne, would you like to say a little bit about yourself and just introduce yourself briefly?
All right. Hello, everyone. As you heard, Mary and I have worked together for a long time. And my background, my academic background is in language and psychology. And I've actually worked in both those fields and eventually came to learning design, I suppose more through the psychology and the people side. And that is really something that has been an extremely valuable journey for me to learn about learning process. And what I love to do is to design learning material. And through that came to coaching, because in fact, there are a lot of similarities between a good way of designing learning material and a good way of coaching.
Thanks, Lynne. And Cindy, can you just tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. I've worked in a number of different industries in a few different countries as well. And I've held a number of leadership positions. And within that, I've had exposure to quite a few different opportunities to have coaching. And I've been sent on a number of different leadership development courses. And as you'll hear later on, I've been involved with Mary from a coaching perspective now probably for a good 7 years, and I think that in itself should be testimony to how awesome I think this program is. And I've had coaching on a personal level, I've had coaching from a business perspective, from a leader's perspective, how to lead others, how to lead yourself. And yeah, I think from where I am in my life at the moment, it's now living all of these wonderful things that I've been learning, and hopefully can share some of that with you today.
Okay. So how are we going to, so I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. I come from quite a different background to go into coaching, I guess. I studied maths, and I spent most of my career in IT industry, primarily with business analysis and strategic planning, and got into coaching in 2002, having spent quite a lot of time facilitating workshops with executive teams. So that was kind of my background. And in 2005, I founded the Coaching Cafe. So yeah, so that's enough about that, I think. So just to just introduce you to what we're going to cover today, just hopefully to cover as much as we can for you. So we've covered the introductions. We're going to give you a little bit of a story about behind True Leadership and how it came about, a few examples and work our way through it. And then we're going to ask Cindy a few questions around her experience with True Leadership. And then we'll sort of go into how True Leadership can be useful for coaches. So how we're going to handle this is Lynne's going to handle the process, and she's going to really be questioning either myself or Cindy to take us through this process. Okay, so Lynne, I'm going to hand over to you without further ado.
Thanks, Mary. Are you going to leave the slide up? Or?
I can stop sharing.
Okay, thanks. So seeing we're talking probably to primarily a group of coaches today, and I know that the whole True Leadership concept and the framework that you developed grew out of your coaching experience. So would you just tell us a little bit about how that happened?
Sure. So, yeah, because I've worked quite a bit with executive teams, facilitating their strategic planning and specifically information strategic planning, I started coaching at the executive level and senior management level. And what I found was that people came to me with fairly consistent themes. Okay, there were themes around looking at themselves in their context, in the organization and in their home. And then there were themes, a second category of themes around leading the team that reported to them. And those kind of involved things like, building the individuals, engaging them, and influencing the context for the team to perform. So that was kind of what led me into looking at some kind of a framework in a way that would bring this together and facilitate the communication with clients.
So then you went on to design this framework, as we call it today, to meet these various challenges and streams of challenges that you found. So do you want to take us through and perhaps show us what the framework looks like in its simple form, and just explain a little bit how you started putting it together in that particular way?
Yeah, sure. So let me just get back to the slide sharing again. So I'm going to start with a very simple view of this. Just want to get these pictures out of the way. All pictures out of the way. Yeah, so basically this picture, if you like, or this square as it is, this frame we like to call it, this frame represents a person, okay? And when I looked at the issues that we were dealing with, primarily with the people that were coming to coaching, there were issues around their own self-leadership, both in terms of themselves in their personal context, as well as what do they need to do and what do they need to achieve from a career perspective. So we really looked at getting to know them better as individuals, getting to know what they wanted to achieve in their lives, and yeah, so everything around them as individuals. Then the other thing that really set the context for this was around the organization that they were part of, and how did that influence the context in which they operated. So, and what was needed from the organization for them to fit in properly there. So it was around understanding the strategy and knowing their role in delivering that strategy to the organization, or their part in that strategy. And then the middle one is really the team that they're part of. So for example, if it was a COO that I was dealing with, he would be part of the executive team, or she would be part of the executive team in the specific organization. And I think the other thing that actually struck me was the patterns that existed across these various levels of, let's say, levels of leadership, or these various areas that we were looking at people raising their awareness. So for example, along the bottom block, positioning self was about raising awareness of that individual and creating a shared understanding between us of what was important to them, what were their talents, what did they want to achieve, what was their support system, everything really around who they were as individuals, both in their professional context, but also in their personal context. Who are the important people in their lives? And the interesting thing was when we looked at the organization, raising awareness around the organization and what existed there, it was quite a similar process, in fact, to understanding the organization, understanding the context within which it operated. What was the competition? What were, who were the stakeholders? All of those kind of things. So there was a lot of similarity in the processes across each of these rows, if you like. See my maths coming out in me here. And the middle block being the team that the person operated in was really around their role and their sense of belonging in that team. So that's where they were part of a family, if you like. And then if we look at the top, it was all around achievement. Where did they want to get as an individual? Where did they need to support the organization getting to? And what did that mean the team had to achieve in that? So it's a very simple view of it, but behind each of these blocks, there are obviously a lot of process that sits there. But I think the interesting thing that when I started playing with this framework and started using it in coaching, was it added great value in terms of communication, in terms of understanding each other and understanding where the person wanted to develop more. So where they were quite comfortable and quite easy, perhaps they knew themselves quite well, but they were not perhaps quite as clear about where they would, how they would serve the organization. So it really served as a great communication tool, even at this simple level.
Okay, so once you've built up that picture of a particular person with respect to all those different blocks and everything that sits behind them, what happens next?
Okay, so I think that's when the magic really started to happen, I think, because through this process of getting to know this person well, which was always the place that we started, and them learning to appreciate themselves in a more positive light, and in a light which saw them as real contributors to the organization. It was almost like we did create that frame for them, that more positive frame for their lives. And the magic happened when they realized that they could use the same frame to look at everybody that they led, everybody in their life, in fact, everybody that was in their team, and their leader and their customers. The same frame actually applied to everybody. And that's really when kind of the penny dropped, I guess.
So this slide that we see here, some sharp-eyed people have probably noticed that it's described as the True Leadership Cube. So this face of it, the picture of one single person, we're about to show you how it actually becomes a cube when the process that Mary's just been describing happens.
Yeah, so this is really how it moved on from the leader seeing themselves in a more positive frame to them seeing the members of the team that they led in a more positive frame, and to seeing their own colleagues in a more positive frame. So that gave everybody that I worked with a tool for communication and a tool for leadership that they actually took into their teams to actually make a difference.
And in fact, you'll see that the arrows continue to infinity and beyond. So we've often talked about how, this once people get this idea, then it applies to the people in their in their personal lives, of course, and in a business context, even to suppliers, to clients. So you really start being able to see everybody in that same kind of picture frame that you first seen yourself.
Absolutely, absolutely. So what I'd like to do now, Lynne, is actually move on to the second set of challenges, if you like. This first frame of just looking at the leader in the context of their own life was looking at them in their home team, if you like, the team that they belong to. So if we move on from here to looking at now the people that they lead, we can perhaps look at if you like, stretch it to the next level of this framework. Yeah, I don't know if you...
Right. So what stands out there is the two things that we really just want to point out today. First of all, the arrows. Can you talk about them first before we move on to the engagement?
Yeah. So I think this is something that we hold very dear to our heart in the Coaching Cafe, and that is that very often in organizations, and I know I've been exposed to this, some organizations will use people to deliver strategic results, and people often feel used in delivering to the organization. And what we're trying to put across here is that we see the goals and strategic requirements of the organization as opportunities to challenge and grow individuals. So it's like switching that around. So we use the goals to grow the people. And in doing that, deliver even better performance and better results than the other way around, and more sustainable. So that's a very essential element, if you like, of the way we do things. Yeah.
So thanks, Mary. So engagement in the middle block over there is not just random. Do you want to explain a bit why it's there, and perhaps also just a little bit, there are many ways that people look at engagement. Just explain a bit how it fits into the true leadership framework.
Okay. So if we just carry on with the arrows, I think that if people feel that they are continuously learning and growing, and that what they're doing actually matters to the organization, that their contribution is essential in delivering the results of the organization. Plus, they are encouraged to use their talents and to align themselves to the organization. So that already is starting a kind of a feeling for engagement, because people experience that kind of flow that Martin Seligman talks about, because they are encouraged to use their talents. They're doing what they do best, and they matter to the organization. So what's important to them matters to the organization. So that's a basic element of it. The engagement sits in the middle, and in the middle of the team column, if you like, on the framework, because we see that the team is where engagement actually happens, where engagement and performance for the organization happens. If it doesn't happen in the team, it doesn't happen anywhere. And it'll only happen in the team if each individual is engaged. So we have a great assessment that works on measuring what's in each of these blocks and how they contribute to engagement. So that is part of the true leadership package, if you like. Yeah, I don't know if is that clear enough, Lynne?
Yes, thanks, Mary. And then just before we move on, we've talked about this as a means of a communication in an organization. So how do you actually make your clients aware of this framework?
Okay. So yeah, the framework is very much part of the initial discussion and part of the measurement of progress, if you like. Where are we going? What is it that we've achieved? Is it that you're happy with? And I think the most exciting thing, and I think Cindy can share more of this, but I think for me, the most exciting thing that happens is when leaders start using it more widely with their people, and they start using it with their people. And Cindy, I first met Cindy was actually in one of those situations where I coached a leader of hers, and then the team that she was part of, and then her as a leader coaching others, if you like. And I mean, I think she still does that today. So I think the ease with which it is communicated, because of the face of it being quite simple, I think is a great benefit. I find it a great benefit.
All right, thanks, Mary. I think we're curious to get on to talking to Cindy, but just before I ask you a couple of questions about your experience, Cindy, Mary, won't you just very quickly mention, we're talking quite often about a leader. So if you end up coaching somebody who's a specialist in the organization or not somebody who's actually a leader, how does this framework work for them?
Okay, so so that's a really nice question. Thanks, Lynn. Because each person in the organization is actually represented by a frame like this. Everything that we talked about in terms of discovering the person, working with them to their own personal fulfillment, they would be part of a team and part of an organization, working with them to understand how the organization supports them and encourages them, and how their engagement is also important to the organization. So, you know, they may not have the influence of a team that works for them, but what happens, I think, is that what has happened is that their satisfaction or their flow in their job and their performance increases, and they can share it. Very often they're very good at sharing it with other specialists and other people. So it is a self-leadership framework as well as a team leadership process. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So we'll come back to you just to wrap up a little bit, particularly with reference to how this has benefited you as a coach and how you feel it can help others. Okay. But first of all, let's chat to Cindy a bit. So Cindy, we heard how you've kind of grown up through True Leadership, from starting as really before it turned into a development program, through coaching in a team and individually. So would you share a little bit of your insights about how this experience made you see yourself differently?
Sure. Just to maybe give a little bit of context as to how things would be for an Afrikaans-speaking girl from South Africa. You grow up very, very humbly, and you are very often encouraged to look at what your weaknesses are, and you know them in alphabetical order, and you have a rating out of 10 for exactly how weak you are, and you have a development plan on how you're going to become less weak. And I think the first key thing that I found with going through this process is it's very focused on who you are, why you are that, what you are good at, and what is it that you can contribute, as opposed to focusing on who you are not and what you cannot do. And from that perspective, when you look at yourself, it's a lot more positive and it's a lot more proactive. So instead of you walking away from something and not contributing because you have this sense of not quite being good enough to do that, you actually proactively become aware of where you are strong, where you are needed, where you can contribute, where you can add value. And from that perspective, you can more proactively go and add to something. So for insights for myself was very much on how you become more positive, how you become more focused. Actually, and two things which I found particularly valuable from this program was identifying what my strengths really were and what my values even were. So to help explain why I do the things I do, why I reason the way I reason, and how I make the decisions that I make. And as a result, that being something that I actively bring to the party, as opposed to sitting in the corner waiting for someone to push my button, if you like. So it kind of brought this overall consciousness of who I am, what is important to me, and what is it that I bring to the table.
So thanks, Cindy. So as you were actually building up that picture of yourself, as Mary was explaining, how did that change the way you started to see other people in your team to begin with?
I've always, I would say generally speaking, I've always tried to look for the good in people, but I didn't necessarily know how. I would try and see why would I think people are nice, but especially from even something like a work perspective, how do you go about finding out what it is that people are really good at and use that? So from a business perspective, we are very focused on what it is that someone's skill set is. What did they study? What experience do they have? And a lot of time is spent focused on that. Whereas there's this wholeness of a person that I feel I lost sight of by not necessarily knowing the full person. Knowing what they studied and what their experience is was great, but you might, for example, there's someone in the team who I love this strength called woo. You might have someone in the team who has a strength that is woo, but because the role that they've applied for and the experience they have doesn't necessarily speak to that, you miss out on the fact that you could have someone in your team who could be really good at going out there, selling what it is that you're doing, getting people on board with what it is that you're doing. And by starting to focus on those things and what it is that drive people, why are they motivated by doing those things, and tapping into that, it actually helped build this whole team that is very engaged, very positive, felt valued as a person, and not just for their skill set. It's great being valued for the fact that you're a good accountant, but it's so much better to be valued for what it is that you as a person bring on top of the fact that you have an accountancy skill, for example. So by starting to look at other people like that, I think it's definitely people felt more appreciated for who they are and not just for the fact that they might have studied something that they're bringing to the table.
So it sounds like it changed the dynamic of the team quite a bit once everybody had been through this process.
Very much. I was fortunate that the team that I was a part of when we started through this whole process were really lovely people, and we all liked each other. But what it started doing was, on top of the fact that it was just a bunch of nice people, we became a really effective team. who honestly trusted each other. And even in the business, our team started getting, they called us the lion pack. It really, they knew, regardless of who they spoke to in the team, they would get consistent answers. They knew we would have each other's back. And even though we kind of all liked each other, there was this thing where they call it courageous conversations, where you kind of tiptoe a little bit about having tough conversations with someone. And because of this, the trust and this really valued feeling that everyone had within the team, it even meant that something that might not be so seen as so greatly positive, like having a tough conversation, we could have quickly, we could have it with ease, because you really knew the person who was talking to you, as opposed to just know about their skill set, which meant that overall, even though we were a nice group of people, we really became a very effective team. And so from that perspective, for me, it's not just from a personal relationship perspective, was it really good for the team, how effective we were. If you were to look at the bottom line and what we were achieving as a team, that also increased.
So it probably a lot of trust was developing in the team at the time. That ability to have those conversations definitely becomes much easier when there's trust and appreciation. So then, how did that? We know that it, because of what happened in your team, this actually spread to the rest of the organization. So what was it that, do you think, that people noticed? Was it kind of, I want to have some of what they're having? You know, what was it that made the execs decide that this is the way we want things to happen in this business?
So I think, and no offense to executives, especially mine at the time, but a lot of focus is placed on what is being delivered to the bottom line. It's not that they do not care about their people or anything like that, but I think first and foremost, if whatever you are doing is adding value to the business, the more the better. And what I think they noticed from our team's perspective is we were all a lot more happy, we were a lot more engaged, and so were our teams. So I think Mary has this thing of calling it playing it forward. And so it's not just within our team where you started seeing this, within each of my teams, you started seeing this play out as well. And I think there was just a general, people were engaged, like we'd sit in meetings, we'd be the team talking, we'd be the team contributing, we'd be the team that was proactive. We were the ones delivering stuff, getting things done. And I think there was also a thing in terms of the language that we used that started changing and the way in which we were doing things. So I made a note here for myself. This was something that I can recall very specifically. And one of the things that we did as a team was look at each other's learning styles. Now, I had my direct line manager and our executive, and they were always at a bit of loggerheads with one another, and we could never understand why, because they're both really bright people with brilliant ideas. And when we did our learning styles, we saw that they were probably as far apart on this one spectrum in terms of the one person being a just do and learn from the doing, versus the other one being research the living daylights out of this topic. And when you have everything that you can possibly get theoretically, you put a plan together and then you go and execute. So now we had tools that we could start using that did not have anything to do with how the role was described, that a person was hired to do. We could go and say, okay, this particular problem requires someone to go and do a shed load of research. This person, really good at it, loves doing it, let her go and do it. Or you know what, we're crunch time, we need to get things done, we need someone who's confident in making decisions, putting things in place. This person, great stuff, even though it didn't have something to do with their role. So I think because of the way that we were able to do that as well, it meant things happened a lot more effectively. And I think if from an executive perspective, you start seeing a team working together like that, getting things done, using people for the right stuff, having them engaged, I would certainly, if that was my business, want to roll that out to everyone as soon as possible.
And thanks, Cindy. And I think actually what you've described there so nicely is actually what Mary showed us in that slide, with the arrow that goes up and the one that goes towards achieving for the organization. So it sounds like that's exactly what your team was doing. They were delivering to the bottom line, and they were engaged, they were growing as people. So yeah, so that looked like what they wanted for everybody.
Yes,
So,
and I think sorry, Lynne, if I can just add one thing to that, I think what was very important for achieving that was the fact that not only did we understand it from an organizational perspective, people understood it for themselves and could see how these things linked together. And I think it's because what was kind of missing always is we were very clear on what the organizational, and this I'll speak from personal perspective, I was very clear on the organizational part. I wasn't particularly clear on my own one, never mind making a connection between the two. And when that started happening, when we started knowing ourselves, when we started knowing each other, and we could link it to this thing within the organization, for me, I just kind of call it that's where the magic happens. And yeah, that became very obvious.
okay, thanks. And then I'd like to still get back to Mary, but would you say something, just one or two things about how you took these learnings and insights into your own leadership role subsequently?
So from a leadership perspective, I think there's the biggest thing that I got from that is having a tool set that I could use to getting to understand and know the person. And by being able to do that, I think there's a general thing as a human that if somebody just asks you a question about yourself, you immediately start feeling like this person cares, and it's about more than just you get paid to do a job. But having the tools to do that, and not in a fluffy way, in a way that is still very focused on genuinely caring about this person, but ultimately being able to link it to what it is that we need to deliver within the team and for an organization, having the tools to go and do that. That has really made a big difference for me from a leadership perspective, as opposed to me doing what I think might be good, but without it having a very clear goal and a clear aim and having something measurable that I could use to see that there is progress and we are moving in the right direction.
And a lot of those are very practical ways of doing that as well.
Very practical.
One more thing I want to ask you, just in terms of the whole purpose and meaning of your life and your role in the world. I know that some amazing things happened. Do you want to just quickly, if you don't mind, just comment on that?
No problem. Yeah, so from a very personal perspective, initially I did a lot of work within the credit environment. And for me, I always thought, like, surely this can't be the purpose of my life, to see how indebted I can get people to the point where they're not quite over the edge, but we squeeze the last bit of money out of them so that we can make as much money for the company and I can make my goals. And it felt really terrible. And I struggled for myself to see, how is this meaningful? Because surely there must be more to my life than doing a job because I get money, because I needed to have a roof over my head and buy food. And how on earth would I define my purpose? And I knew I love people. And I was always like, how on earth do I bring these things together? And as I started going through this process, and this is where for me this magic happened between linking my personal things and within a team, understanding what the role was that I played, I realized that far bigger than just doing the job that I get paid to do to the best of my ability, people actually used me for these people skills, if you like, that I had. and that I played a very important role for the people within the business, even if it was something like they had someone they could come and soundboard things to. They had someone who, if they had a tough day and they just needed someone to talk to them and kind of be a bit of their cheerleader, I could be there and I could do that. And ultimately, it still benefited the company because it meant these people could go back into the business and felt either refreshed or felt heard or whatever the case may be. And it meant that they were still more engaged. So it helped me really from that perspective see that there was so much more that I was bringing to the organization outside of, and that gave meaning and purpose even to what I'm doing in my job, far beyond just the role that I was paid to do. And now I actually actively go and do that within the business as opposed to it happening by accident.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Cindy. I think, you know, you're always such a lovely example to us of authenticity and of really growing through this process and becoming, I'm sure you've probably got more room still to grow, but to have become actually such an excellent version of yourself. So thanks for doing that and for giving us also confidence in the process.
Pleasure.
So Mary, I don't know if you want to ask anything else of Cindy, because otherwise maybe we can start looking a little bit about how you felt this really worked for you in your coaching days, and what you think the benefits could be for other coaches to be using this framework.
Yeah, I think that's really the purpose of what we need to do here. Because I know there are a few questions that we need to make a little bit of time available at the end. So I think just hearing Cindy talk and not asking the next question, just listening and hearing what Lynne asks, it was interesting. And I think one of the things that really stood out, and I know this of Cindy, and this is what's happened for me as well, using this framework, and I think pretty much most of the people that I've worked with, is that it becomes a framework for self-coaching, and it's because you can see yourself in that same light. So everybody who goes through this, whether it's in a team coaching environment, whether it's an individual coaching environment, whether it's in a workshop environment, actually walk away with the tool for self-coaching. So that was one thing that really struck me. I think the other thing is, and this specifically happened in the environment where I met Cindy initially, is there was a huge diversity of leadership thinking and leadership training. People had been to Harvard, people had been to the London Business School, people had been to UCT, Stellenbosch, wherever, and rather than trying to choose which one of those kind of approaches we would use, it actually was able to embrace the diversity of leadership thinking. And I think that really added to the richness of what came out of it. Really, you know, we really were able to use the richness that the individuals brought. I think then it's also, I think what was also useful in communication is that the sort of simple principles that underlie the whole true leadership framework are kind of universal and understood by most people. And I sort of think about a few of them, like people matter, and what's important to them matter. Performance matters. If you're in an organization, performance matters. People find meaning beyond themselves. So organizations who want to help people flourish need to appreciate that they will be looking for meaning beyond themselves. Relationships and trust are the fabric of the organization. And I think we will discuss, I saw there was one question which I haven't been able to answer on the chat there, that how do you create that trust? And I think that we can talk a little bit maybe in an open question situation. But sharing things that really matter to you, that really are important to you in a team environment, really, and I think Cindy maybe can comment on that as well shortly, that's really what creates the trust. It's not always easy in the beginning. And yeah, and you know, talents on their own are actually no good in a team if people don't trust each other to use those talents. So the trust is like fundamental. And then, as I said, the essence of what we do, that we use the goals to challenge and grow people. That's a fundamental philosophy we have. And for me, it's part of spiritual leadership. It's about appreciating that leadership and coaching are spiritual practices that actually create that. And then I think the last thing, and I think the one that brings me such satisfaction is the ripple effect, and how as coaches and as leaders, the kind of ripple, you don't know where it's rippling to, and it has no boundaries. It just does ripple. I think so. Those are the sort of principles. I think the other thing that the framework and the processes behind the framework really help us with, and I think a lot of coaches use these kind of things, is one of the most difficult things to do is to see yourself and to see others as you really are, without the worldviews, without all of those things. And that's one of the things that we encourage people to see themselves with clarity and compassion. The combination of those two things just releases people. And then, yeah, I think we spoke about this quite a bit, but the fact that the framework is really visual and simple, and it's an easy communication tool in coaching. And it's an easy communication tool for leaders who have been coached to carry it forward. So I think, I don't know, I certainly had the struggle in the beginning, but moving into a coaching, as a coach, as a business, to actually make a living when you start from coaching is not easy. You need, you know, when you coach one person in an organization, and then you get put in another organization, or you go to another organization, and there's no extension of that. And I think the most exciting thing for coaches is when that starts to take off, and people want to experience the same kind of thing. Yeah, and then the one thing that we haven't sort of gone into any detail with is the whole visual representation of the engagement model and process that we have. That was extremely useful for me. And when coaching leaders, for them to see how they can improve the engagement of each individual by addressing each of the blocks, if you like, that surround the engagement. Yeah, so those were the main things, I think, Lynne.
All right.
Yeah, so, yeah. I think maybe Magda has got some questions for us there, or shall we call Magda back on? Yeah, Magda.
Hi, sorry, you guys are doing so well. I thought you would just read off the questions.
Yeah, so we just read them off here. So I didn't.
Yeah, please go for it. I think it's better if you maybe just take a look and see what's relevant.
Get rid of that and see. Okay, where did we start with questions now? Okay, that was all greetings. Okay, so wow, use the goals to challenge and support people. Growth, super calm. Yeah, okay, that was more of a comment. I heard the expression bringing who they are in addition to what skills they have. Super close to ikigai. Yeah, that's okay. Also is who one is it fixed or can it change? Is that a question that we want answered there? Basically, I mean, my experience is, I mean, if I take Cindy, I've seen Cindy changing and growing and developing and behaving in different new ways and gaining more confidence. But the basic Cindy, the talents that we started with are still talents, and they've just grown. As Cindy, you say quite so nicely, focusing on them have taken them from an 8 to a 10 rather than focusing on being the other things from a 6 to an 8 or whatever.
Yeah.
If
I can maybe just add to that, I think there's two things, especially from this program, which also stood out for me, where I was always at the start, Mary would tell us that you already have the answers and it's all within you. It's just the process of actually becoming aware of them. And I was always thinking, no, man, I am definitely not that clever. And I'm definitely not that good. I need to be taught. And through this process, and that's why for me, and what Mary says is so true, it's a process of discovery. So from an outside perspective, it might look like there is change, but the change for me personally wasn't changing who I am. It was becoming more who I already was. And through that process of discovery, it could be something that I could actually live out. And the more I lived it out and the more I discovered, the more I could become confident in the person that fundamentally I was, but just wasn't that clear on. And especially from things like a values perspective, but then also from a strengths perspective, where my executive at the time, he had this wonderful expression that he called it diamonds in the rough. Now, a diamond in the rough is great, but I'm telling you, when it's blinging on my finger, it is a lot better. So, and that's part of what this process was, is that the diamonds are there, they're just a bit in the rough. And going through this process, it helps them just become polished and shaped and being something that's really blingy and shiny that you want to bring out, as opposed to it's kind of buried there and it still needs to be unearthed.
Oh, that's such a good way of describing it, because we sometimes talk about this as an inside-out approach. So exactly what you're saying there, Cindy, you know, that rough diamond is there. You learn through the process to appreciate yourself, to polish yourself a little bit, and to shine, actually, to do all the things that good diamonds do when they out there on our fingers. So yeah, that's also why we feel so strongly about starting with the self, starting with self-leadership, getting that person to really develop a rich picture of that frame, that picture of themselves. And it has the added benefit then of being able to see other people. It acts almost as a template in a way that they can apply to other people. But the first thing is to do it for yourself. And it's like they always tell us, you know, do it for yourself first so that you can do it for others.
So
I love the example.
Sorry, yeah. Cindy, I'd like you to answer this question. I mean, I can answer it from a process point of view, but where are we now? I lost it now. Oh yeah, here we go. What specifically happened for individuals to trust and appreciate each other more in your team?
There's one particular moment, or not a moment, but a process that we went through, where Mary asked each one of us to actually say, what is it in every single member of the team that we appreciate and that we see them bringing to the table. And there were such profound moments, and I think it kind of links to one of the questions that I'm seeing here that says, if becoming who you already are is something that's inherent, what is the role of the sculptor? And for me, that's kind of part of it is from, again, if I speak from my own perspective, there were these things that the members of my team were telling me that I promise you I was unaware of. They were telling me all of these things that they appreciated about me and that I was bringing to the table. The thing is, I brought it unconsciously. I didn't consciously bring it to the table. And on the one hand, that for me is kind of answering from a personal perspective. The role of the sculptor is actually helping you unearth these things that it's there, but you're unaware, and you're becoming aware of them. And then because you're becoming aware, you can work with it. And from that trust perspective, because you now have, let me tell you, there is nothing that fosters trust like seeing earnestly how your team members appreciate you. And we did then go into some of the tougher things, but because this laid the foundation of knowing there are all of these things that your team actually value within you, that kind of, it was one of the building blocks. And now I just had the other one and now it's left me. Oh, and then one of the other practical things that we did is you shared a bit about yourself and moments that potentially you felt a little bit vulnerable in, or something that was really special to you. And having that process facilitated by someone also meant there was a bit of someone external that you already, I don't know, it kind of felt a little bit protected, I have to say, but everyone participated in the process. And when you're just that little bit vulnerable together, after you already had the foundation laid of the value you're bringing and the appreciation the team had within you, there were these little blocks that started building that foundation of trust. And the first time you go into something that's a little bit tough, and we went out, and I tell you, the one day we felt, we almost felt a little bruised, and then you saw, hang on, but we're still appreciating each other. There's still all of these things, and you come back, and every time there's a little building brick and a little building brick. Before you know it, we were really sharing very tough things, very vulnerable things, and if I can tongue-in-cheek say, if you have someone like me in the team who is really open to crying, that also makes a difference.
So Cindy, did you want to answer this question here? Because I think it's relating to the meaning. Cindy, why do you remain in the credit company instead of changing to a more healing organization?
Yeah, that is, believe you me, that's the question I kept asking myself. And the thing is, once you start seeing yourself as a proactive member, knowing what your skills are and what it is that you can bring to the table, you actually start changing part of the culture and the organization. So for me, there was a leaving and going to a more healing organization, to me kind of looked like I'd be running away and like I'd be a victim. And as I started understanding myself and what it is that motivates me, I could even start looking at something like the credit environment and see some of these things that irk me a little bit. Like, I don't want people to become over indebted, but within the organization, I actually am in a position to influence the rules around how we give credit. How we then develop things, like one of the things we then did was we developed an educational program for people who might not understand credit that well. So how we actually help prevent them from becoming indebted in the first place. So I could remain within the organization, and from that perspective, proactively start playing a role and bringing these things that I had as concerns and addressing them so that it becomes something that's good. And so that, because I don't know how house buying works in all of the countries that everyone is from, but when you're in South Africa, you need a home loan to buy a house. Few of us are lucky enough to have enough money to buy a house with. That ultimately means you then go into credit. Now, helping people from that perspective to see, how do I in a positive way have credit as a tool that people can use to build their lives, as opposed to them becoming indebted. There was this whole thing that I actually felt became something good in the company, as opposed to just seeing negative about it.
Cindy, I think we need to wrap up. I think we've kind of overrun a little bit of time, but yeah, I think, Magda, do you want to wrap up, or are you happy for us just to?
Yeah, if there's anything you want to finish that you want to leave the audience with, please go ahead. The only thing that I have to say is thank you to everyone, especially our panelists. And for those of you who want to claim CCEUs, the password is cappuccino, because we have Coaching Cafe here. So the link is in the chat. But yeah, thank you so much for today. So if you want to wrap up, please.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for interesting questions. And I think, I don't know if there's a way of answering any others that want to come through. But I think,
yes, there is. Sorry to interrupt, but I will happily put this topic on our forum. So I think most of you have gone to forum.coacharia.com. It's free to use and register. So please head over there, and I will add the questions from the chat into the forum.
Okay, great. Okay, that'll be wonderful. Okay, can we get a copy of the chat, Magda? Would that be all right?
Yep. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Okay, great. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for being here and for being present, and Magda for introducing us and making this opportunity. So thanks, and thanks, Cindy, and thanks very much. Okay. So thank you.
Have a good evening. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thanks, Magda.